Hello and welcome to the Book Club on Sports Tonight Live, where we talk about books that come out in the world of sport. It's pretty straightforward, really. And joining me on the sofa today is Richard Lee, the author of this book, Graduation, Life Lessons of a Professional Footballer. Richard, what a pleasure to meet you.
Great to be here.
Can I call you Rich?
Of course.
Rich seems to be the diminutive of your name.
That is right, yeah.
So welcome to the sofa, welcome to Book Club. I suppose the first question is, why in your busy life, with your many ventures, the main one being a professional footballer, why did you feel the need to write this book?
To be honest, it kind of happened by accident to a large extent. Every year I write a blog on the previous season, which I've got a personal website that I run it from. So I started writing the blog and just doing it on my phone. I remember just sitting out on my balcony, and 2 days later I realised I'd written 10,000 words and I was only in November in the season. So it made me realise how unique the season was, and being as unique as it was, and with the things I'd learned elsewhere in regards to psychology, NLP, it just gave me an idea that it could be the ideal kind of base to tell, to explain a lot of these things on.
Now, you've mentioned that quickly, the sort of the psychology and the NLP. We'll come to that in more detail later. But that's what's interesting about this, is that it's sort of both a sort of mini autobiography, but also almost a self-help book. And added to that, it's like a little guide for goalkeepers. Did you have one particular target in mind when you wrote it? Because if you did a little bit more maybe on the NLP, which is, tell us what NLP is.
Well, neuro-linguistic programming, which basically puts the use of language to, neuro being the mind, linguistic language, programming. So the way of programming the mind using language, changing thought patterns, changing belief systems, goals, etc., and just being more productive. But the actual, you say it's, I was very careful not to make it an autobiography, purely for the reason that I wouldn't buy my own autobiography. It's I think obviously if you're a high profile player, then it's really interesting to read. Whereas I'm quite honest in the assessment of my career that I've been really proud of it, but it was never going to be something that would have been enough of interest to myself. Therefore, I wouldn't have done that. Where I thought it could be quite unique, bringing in the NLP angle, and then, as you mentioned, kind of as a bit of a byproduct of that, obviously there was a lot of goalkeeping information involved, just purely because obviously the last 10, 12 years I've been a professional goalkeeper, and that obviously played a major part.
So as a kind of self-help book, I feel like you could expand a couple of chapters and it would be very useful, because at its most basic level there's a kind of, you could sort of dilute it down to a sort of positive mental attitude is very, very important. And how crucial was it? At what point did you feel that you needed to change your psychology between the sticks in goal?
Yeah, I mean initially at a very young age, and I kind of delved in it to a point, and I never really fully grasped it. I read a few books and I was getting similar ideas, but I wasn't really implementing it into my game, and this continued for a long time, and I kind of took on a lot of knowledge without really applying it. A big change would have happened probably when I was 23, 24, when I met a psychologist that came into Watford, a guy called Keith Mincher, who's the England under-21 psychologist now, and fantastic person, and opened my eyes and led me down some new avenues in regards to a couple of, I think they call themselves life coaches, but people that speak of this kind of thing, and I went on a few seminars, and on the back of that I read a lot of books as well, all again very similar subject, but just kind of reiterating a lot of the things that I was learning. And then last season in particular, I think I kind of had the Eureka moment to a point where season started badly. I just joined Brentford, lost my place after one game, and I knew I needed to change something. Although I had all this knowledge and I'd read so much, I still wasn't doing it, obviously. Performances were showing that. So I actually went to a hypnotherapist, and that was quite a big moment for me, in that it was, I guess it was the idea that you can, all the stuff that you finally learned, you can really integrate it into the unconscious and start living it. That was the thing for me, and there's many different ways in which you can do that. For me, hypnotherapy did work, and thankfully since then, things have got better and better. Yeah,
and in terms of that Eureka moment, that had been the sort of culmination of lots of taking in knowledge. But when you first sat down and read a book about sports psychology, or trying to give yourself this positive boost, why did you feel the need? What was happening to you as a professional or as a human that made you feel like you needed help?
It was match days. Always match days, and it was I couldn't figure it out for a long time. Training would be fine, I'd train every day, loved training, and there was no pressure. I'll touch on that in a minute, but there was no pressure. You just trained, and it was great. Suddenly, I come to match day, and it was this. The second I woke up, I knew I had a game, and it was a feeling in the pit of my stomach. I know I've got a game, and leading up to the game, it's funny how the mind can work, and leading up to the game, all sorts of things will be going through my mind in regards to the game itself, things that could go wrong, you know, what other people might think. Then you start, I mean, just again, really kind of obscure thoughts like, what if this happens and the game gets called off, or what if the pitch suddenly gets frozen? It's like, it's all irrelevant, you know. And by the time the game came, I was like mentally drained, you know, because I'd let my thoughts get away with me, and this became quite a regular thing. And I was almost of the belief that confidence was something that just came and went. It was, you know, you at times you'll have it, at times things will be going well and it's great and you'll feel great, but then you have bad times and you won't have this mystical confidence that comes and goes. And it's only very recently really that I've realised that all this comes within. You know, no one can make you feel any way, no situation can make you feel any way. It's all down to you, how you obviously promote yourself, present yourself and make yourself feel. So that was the initial thing. I suppose I'm so glad it's happened now, obviously, with the amount of learning that I've had. That was the initial thing for me, though. It was just game days. I couldn't figure out game days, and it's 10 years worth of work in order to do that. Incredible,
really, for us to think that, because, you know, we watch football week in, week out. We have our own opinions about the goalkeepers and you know, the outfield players as well. But to realise that each individual human on that pitch is going through some kind of anxiety, some kind of negative feelings in the build-up to a game. And of course, it is different for the keeper to everybody else in a team, because you are on your own and you have to deliver like in spurts, you know, like a very, very short notice, quickly deliver, and then, you know, you can be quiet for another 10, 15 minutes. Was that part of it, do you think, the fact that you have a different experience to everyone else on the pitch?
Do you know, yeah, I think you're right. I think there's definitely certain, obviously, we're all different characters, and I think obviously that plays a big part. For some people have this going on in terms of they perhaps need to study this kind of thing. Others don't. Others are just, they are the way they are. They don't necessarily have anxiety, or, you know, and there's pros and cons to both approaches. I was for a very long time, and even now to a point, like you say, goalkeeping is very different to the other positions. And you can play a fantastic game as a goalkeeper and lose 1-0, or you can play a dreadful game as a goalkeeper and win 4-3. Yeah. You know, but it's kind of, so you can't have probably as much effect on the game as maybe a striker or what have you. And at the same time, you could play a really good game, make one mistake and lose 1-0 and have 20,000 fans on your back. You know, it is obviously, it is, as I say, you have to be a bit mad to be a goalkeeper, and it is, you know, it's for moments like that where it can be very tricky. So I would agree that it is perhaps goalkeepers more so than outfield players.
The culmination of a lot of your work on yourself, sort of mentally and physically, we've got a picture here, which I think is from the penalty shootout against Everton, is that right?
Right, yeah.
Talk us through that, because in the book, that is one of the as a reader, one of the most exciting moments, one of the moments where we really get under your skin and realise how important that work has been.
That was a big night. I mean, when I look back, and like I say, the season didn't start well, I found myself third choice, and it was only actually because the goalkeeper we'd brought in was cup tied, couldn't play the cup games. The biggest game was perhaps the whole game. Just before that, we played Hull in the cup, and without sounding over dramatic, obviously I'd only just joined the club, but I knew if I played poorly there, we'd have lost, which would have meant there wouldn't have been another game to play, and the chances are I wouldn't have played again for Brentford. You know, simple as that. So that was a huge game. And then the Everton game itself was then the next kind of challenge, and it was just the dream. It was as if, you know, I suppose everything that, you know, I've been doing, learning, etc. That night, I felt fantastic from, you know, the first minute till the penalty shootout, and to win on penalties as we did, it was, even now, it gives me goosebumps thinking about it.
And it's an amazing thing, and from that point on, you must feel that helped to seal your fate. Not that, you know, we can control our own fate. It gets very complicated when you read a book with so much kind of psychology in it, because you realise that you're in control. But that night must have sealed your fate to the extent now that you're first choice for Brentford, and have been pretty much ever since. So it really has had a massively positive impact on your career. And on your personal life. But in the unreconstructed world of football, how big a leap was it for you to first of all admit that maybe you had a problem, and B, one of the things that's interesting about the book is that you say that you don't claim to love football. Those two things in that world could make people be quite standoffish against you, I'd imagine.
Yeah, you know, I kind of explained, I think the bit you mentioned about not loving football, and the only way I can explain it is if it's, you know, imagine doing something that, and I did. I loved it as a kid. Loved it when I was young, and you played. No pressure. No one cares. Da, da, da. It was like, imagine taking that and suddenly adding to that a load of injuries. You know, each one that could potentially end your career. The anxiety, all the pressure, again, I mean, with pressure, that's another thing that is, you know, you perceive pressure. Pressure is an internal creation, you know, something I didn't realise. But again, at the time I was unaware of this. It was all like, all this pressure that's on me. I've got to perform. I've got friends, family, whatever. So then suddenly the fun of the game, it was like actually, you know, even financially, you know, you need to be playing in order to get your bonuses, in order to get, suddenly so it's financial, there was then pressure from friends, from family, injuries, you know, then you're always trying to keep a place and trying to promote, and suddenly all these things, you just like, that enjoyment suddenly went, and it was very much like, this is a job and I need to do it, and it just stopped being fun. And so for a long time, I did see it as a job. And I think, again, I touch a lot on perception and how you view things, and I'm very aware now that, you know, I was viewing things incredibly negatively, and you can quickly flip it and look at the other side and be like, do you know what, I'm playing football. Yeah. This is an incredible job. And I know from the and now, you know, I'm thankful to say I see it in a much brighter light. And, you know, like I say, this season's been the most enjoyable so far, although perhaps not with the highlights of last season. But it's amazing how the mind can work, and how simple changes, you know, from simple changes of perception can make such a difference.
And if you were like, you know, with people watching at home who maybe find themselves stuck in a rut, or they are full of negative feelings, or feel the pressure, is there sort of a very basic thing you can suggest to help people to see things slightly differently, just in everyday life, to get on with things?
Yeah.
Because it's really worked for you. Yeah. That's what comes out in the book, is that it's made a huge difference to you, and we already presume you're in a great position playing professional football, but you needed help.
I needed a boost, yeah. I was, you know, I'm very much stuck in a rut. I think I mentioned towards the end sort of about 12 to 15 key points. They're all quite basic ideas, but even something as simple as your physiology, you know, generally when you're not feeling so good, you know, your physiology won't be great. Actually just sort of standing up, even jumping up and down for a couple of minutes just to get the blood flow and get yourself in a good state of mind again. You know, tiredness, when you're tired, it's easy to allow thoughts to run away with you, and, you know, a good night's sleep can do a good job. And then in regards to actually the awareness of thought, to realise that with each negative thought, you're going to feel bad. It releases negative chemicals into the body. You're going to feel bad. Obviously, the opposite true with good thoughts. So just having a bit of an awareness of your thoughts, of your beliefs. Beliefs will control your actions. Again, like I said, I touched upon a lot of this in there. Just some simple kind of things where you'll start to realise some of the things that you believe to be true that aren't actually necessarily helping you. So yeah, like you said, there are 3 or 4 key points that, even that alone, you know, will go a long way.
And it's great as well, because a few of the things that you mention in here, I kind of do in an amateur NLP sort of way anyway. You kind of make yourself feel more positive about things. Like I do this when I drive around the country doing stand-up comedy gigs. If I am stuck in traffic, I do my best just to kind of enjoy the moment. I can't help where I am. And that's really important. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a break. After the break, we're going to talk to a sports psychologist on Skype to sort of back up, or maybe have different ideas to you. But we're going to go to a break now, so join us after the break. And in the meantime, try some nice positive physiology on yourself, and join us positive-minded after this break. Welcome back to the Book Club on Sports Tonight Live, where I'm joined on the sofa by Richard Lee, the author of Graduation: Life Lessons of a Professional Footballer. What we were talking before the break about how much of a difference this kind of just addressing the basics of your psychology has helped you to improve. And at the moment, do you feel like you're in a happy place, or do you need more things in your life? Are you looking to move up the leagues? What's it like at Brentford at the moment?
Yeah, no, it's a great atmosphere, in truth. It's a really good atmosphere. I think there's always a case for sort of continual improvement, in that, as with anything, there's always things you can work on, things you can improve, and, you know, I don't think you ever get to the point where you're like, I've cracked it. So it's something that I'll continue to learn, continue to add to my knowledge and to my game. And yeah, in terms of my professional dreams and goals, you know, I'd still like to obviously play for some time longer, and hopefully progress with Brentford.
And what was nice is because this book is kind of set that the majority of it is during last season, and already this season you've got more points. There was a point at this that you said we need to be above this amount of points to avoid relegation. You're already, I think you're 8th in League One at the moment, and you're a couple of places below the playoffs. So that's quite exciting potential to go up to Championship.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, we've it's been a funny season in that there's, you know, we've tried to, we've got a new manager obviously with Uwe Rosler, who's come in. He's tried to instill a real, I suppose, a passing game, get us playing the right way. And when we've done it well, it's been fantastic. We've had a couple of great results and we've looked really good. Then other times where it hasn't gone quite so well, it hasn't looked quite so good. And we've struggled a bit at home, but away from home done very well. And, you know, I think it's that one. If someone had said at this time of the season we'd be within touch and distance of the playoffs, As you say, at the moment, you know, relegation isn't a threat. So, you know, I think there's a lot of positives to take from where we are. And as you say, if we have a good end to the season, there's no reason why we can't make the playoffs.
Superb. Now, just to sort of maybe back up some of your ideas of sports psychology that are in this book that have helped you to sort of come out of your anxiety and negativity, we should be joined on the Skype wall by Roberto Forzoni. Roberto, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, yeah.
Hello, Roberto. Thanks very much for joining us. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm very good. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. We've got Richard Lee here. Are you aware of each other's work at all?
Sorry, what was that?
We've got Richard Lee here. Are you aware of his work, Brentford goalkeeper?
Yeah, I've heard about it. It's good. And I'm really impressed. I was at Brentford a few years ago coaching. I was first team coach, reserve team manager under Steve Coppell.
Oh, right, okay.
We had a few of the players really into their psychology then. People like Ivar Ingemarson.
Yeah.
And
so I'm impressed that, Richard, you're doing the psychology and it's helping you.
No, cheers, thank you.
Now, Roberto, Richard's book is kind of a testament to how important sports psychology and the mental approach to sport is in English football these days. From your perspective, when did it really start to be taken seriously that the individual athletes and sports people needed to focus on their mental work as much as their physical?
Probably the last 10 years as a distinct science. Before that, you had great psychologist managers, you know, like Clough, and even Ferguson and people using psychology all the time, but probably not aware of how they were using it or the science behind it. So it's really come to a fore in the last 10 years as a sports science.
In Richard's book, he uses a lot of phrases like outcome-based mindset, optimum performance state, and sort of neuro-linguistic programming, which is kind of almost like a brand of sports psychology. Are these techniques that you use?
Well, NLP is a strange one, really, because it uses a few techniques from sports psychology research to benefit performers. But there's not too much science behind NLP. So I prefer to work with the research-based evidence. So a lot of my work is done on sports science as opposed to NLP. Having said that, some of the NLP strategies are fantastic, and I do use them.
Richard, give us an example. There's one in your book about when you put your finger and thumb together.
Creating anchors.
What is that?
It's, I guess it's the idea that you can create a feeling. The example I think I used in the book was the idea that you hear a song from years ago. The second you hear that song now, it'll take you back to a time and place, or you'll remember where you were when you heard that song. That kind of idea that you'll have built an anchor, probably an unconscious anchor, in regards to that song. And it's the same sort of thing, you know, these feelings I'm feeling on a match day, a lot of these will be not very productive anchor that I've built up over years. And it may be a case that you need to break things like that down if they're not particularly productive. Or on the other case, obviously, when you're playing a game, you want to feel full of energy, in a good place, obviously psyched up and raring to go. You want to try and work on that, and so it may be things like imagery. You know, it's something I do a lot of prior to games. Imagine being in the venue, sights, sounds, smells, etc. Really being there, experiencing it, so that when you actually do experience it, you've got that prior knowledge. Does
that kind of work ring true with you, Roberto? Is it kind of stuff you instill in?
Very much so, and I'm pleased you mentioned the anchoring and music as well. It was, I think, 10, 12 years ago now, we used to play at Brentford, every time we started the warm-up, running across the pitch, we used to play R. Kelly's The World's Greatest.
Yeah.
So it became this trigger for the players that's it, now we're at work.
Yeah.
And that tune, the guy in the box playing the music had a cue, he had instructions. As soon as I started the running across the pitch, that had to come on. And that was used as an anchor for us. So, Richard, I'm impressed you use. And also, you're saying about the visualization and imagery. And David James has been using that for some years. And, you know, he's benefited from it himself. And he gives this great example of when he goes to the match, he stops at a set of traffic lights and he catches a couple of crosses. Yeah. And he said, you know, the guys next to him look at him as if he's mad because he's literally putting his hands in the hair in the car. Crosses.
Well, I'll always watch him prior to, and that, you know, when I was younger, I thought he was crazy. Before a game, he'd be stood 20, 25 yards out doing his various movements, and now that's me. That's me prior to a game. People looking at me like I'm nuts, but you go through your movements, you go through your, and it's great, you know. And I think doing it really positively. It's amazing how I think. In fact, you'll probably be able to back this up. I'm going to say this without the evidence, but am I right in thinking some of the neural pathways that you'll be using when you're doing the imagery, obviously you're hitting a lot of the same neural pathways when you're actually physically doing the exercise itself?
Right.
Richard, you could be a sports psychologist.
I think he's got his eyes set on knocking you out of business. It's interesting that you mentioned David James, because I'm a Bristol City fan, and in terms of the mindset of a goalkeeper, how tough is it? I need both of you to sort of talk about this, but you've been there physically when you're in front of the fans, both home and away fans, your own and the opposition, and maybe you're not having a great game, and they can just say whatever they like to you, and you have to be able to deal with that. And of course, if you have a nickname like poor David James, Calamity James, how do you shrug that off? How do you overcome the negativity from something like that?
I think it works on both sides. In that, even the other way, you make a great save and you could be up in the clouds for a few seconds, you know. And I think I always come back to Brad Friedel for me in terms of, and actually I spent a year with him at Blackburn, and someone that is just so level-headed, regardless of whether he's played a great game or hasn't been so good, and that's very, very rare, but just have that level head through it. And I think, obviously, there's the idea that, you know, any external event doesn't necessarily have to affect you. That's your, again, decision, whether you let it in, whether you let comments affect you, right. You know. And I'd be lying if I said that I didn't hear what a lot of fans say, and obviously opposing fans are going to give you some abuse, you know. But I think it's just going through the kind of tools that you know in order to block it out, right, back to where you need to be, in the state you need to play the game, and then play the game in that state, you know. And like I said, it works both ways. And
Roberto, from your perspective, have you had any, you don't need to mention any names, but sports people that just find it really hard to use psychology, to actually lock into some of these neural processes that are so vital to unlocking their best game?
Yeah, I've actually worked with a few that don't enjoy using sports psychology, funny enough. And, you know, you're talking about some of the top performers in the world. So they invariably want to give it a try, see if it works for them. And for some people, I've got to say, it doesn't really work unless they believe in it, unless they feel they're going to get some benefit and want to work hard at it. It's not something, some people expect it to be a switch on, switch off. I'll go and see a psychologist and I'll be fixed tomorrow. You know, and managers are probably the worst at that. And I've got a problem player, come and see him, or you get the phone call the night before a match, and the manager says, this player's in this state, can you help him? And he's playing tomorrow. You know, there's this misconception that you can change things instantly, and sometimes you can have a big effect shortly, but it takes a bit of time. It's like any skill, isn't it? You've got to work at it. And Richard can probably endorse that. He's been using it for some time, and he's reaping the benefits now.
Well, I was going to say is actually I've got one tattoo, and it's the word Kaizen. I don't know if you've heard of the word Kaizen, and it's a Japanese word that means continual, never-ending improvement, which goes along that. Like you say, you never really get to the point where you've cracked it. You know, there is always something more, and you can quite easily, you know, I'm aware of this myself. I suppose if you don't continue your learning, you can quite easily revert back to how you were. You know, you're hardwired a certain way. It's quite easy to go back to how you were, and I'm sure I could go back to being that anxious goalkeeper that I was a few years ago if I wanted to be.
But it's clear what you were saying about Roberto, about it not being a short, quick fix, is you put a lot of work into this. You were reading a lot even before you saw the hypnotherapist, and then continued to read and continue to study. Have you actually consulted the likes of Roberto as well as your own reading?
Yeah, oh yeah, no, massively. I'll make a big point in there. I've got sort of 4 mentors in particular. In fact, one guy you might have heard of, Keith Mincher, who's the England.
Yeah, I know Keith. Yeah. Keith years ago at the FA.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Keith. I mean, Keith was the one who was huge for me. Like, he was the first one who really led me down the road of reading the Celestine Prophecy, The Secret, Anthony Robbins, Awaken the Giant Within, Robin Sharma, Deepak Chopra. So I read all these books. So as well as the sort of NLP side of things, as you know, I suppose even a little bit of spiritual and obviously psychological, etc. in there. He was perhaps the biggest one. I still speak to him now on a monthly basis. We have an hour conversation on the phone, and I'm there with my pad and pen, and writing down all his wisdom.
So and he's a football guy as well, isn't he?
Yeah, he's, you know, I met him at Watford, and you know, obviously he was largely credited to a large extent. Obviously, the first season at Watford, from being favourites for relegation, you know, all of a sudden got promotion, and the lads were fantastic, and it was amazing how the lads took to him. And as you mentioned before, it's a case, if lads want to learn it, they'll be all yours. They'll listen, they'll learn it. If they don't, there's not a lot you can do, which is fine. Not everyone necessarily needs it. I think that year in particular, though, he was a huge favourite amongst the lads, and you know, he got some fantastic results.
Superb. Roberto, just before we say goodbye, just a quick explanation of the framed shirt behind you. What's the story there?
Oh, that's an Northern Ireland shirt, Mike Taylor.
Okay,
Got a number of shirts in the office from various footballers, and we provide gloves for footballers as well under the Salesport brand. So it's we're talking to a lot of goalkeepers.
Nice.
Okay, Roberto, thank you very much for joining us, but I would say watch your back, because he's got a lot of good ideas in here, and I think he might be chasing you as a sports psychologist in the future. Roberto, thank you very much.
They do. Thank you. Cheers.
So Richard, this weekend you're playing Oldham, is that right?
We are, yes.
So what are you doing at the moment to get yourself in the right mindset to play that game?
Obviously, everyday training, a lot of physical training before now and then. For me, it'll kind of kick in probably closer to the weekend, Thursday, Friday. Obviously, nutrition's very important. There's actually different elements, as with all footballers. Obviously, nutrition being a big part of it, sleep patterns being a very important part. Obviously, the training that you do physically and then mentally. So for me, it'll be a lot on the Friday. I'll very much chill out, get the thoughts very positive, run through the game in my head. Similarly on a Saturday morning, and then the idea being that 3 o'clock on a Saturday I'll peak.
Superb. Well, look, if you, what's your Twitter feed?
@RLeeGK.
So if you have any questions about improving your game or any kind of NLP requests, just get in touch with Rich, but don't bother him on Friday because he'll be chilling out for the Oldham match. Richard, what an inspiration to meet you.
Cheers.
And good luck with the book. I hope it shifts loads of copies. And that has been the book club on Sports Tonight Live. Join us again soon for another episode. Thank you. Goodbye.
Stay ahead of the game with Sports Tonight Live. Don't miss a thing. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Search for Sports Tonight Live on Facebook and like our fan page. Follow Sports Tonight TV on Twitter and tweet us your thoughts and opinions. Sports Tonight Live, it's the platform for the fans.